Picture Britain in the early 1960s. The austerity of the post-war years was finally fading, wages were rising, and a young generation was hungry for freedom, real, wind in your hair, pedal-to-the-floor freedom. And the open road was calling. What followed was one of the most extraordinary decades in British automotive history, when affordable roadsters weren't a luxury, they were a lifestyle. But here's what most people never realize: some of the greatest driving machines of that era cost less than a family saloon. Today on Britain Rewind, we're counting down 10 of them. And trust us, the car sitting at number 1? It still gets the glory for a reason. Number 10, Morgan 44. We begin our journey with a car that refused to move with the times, and that was entirely the point. The Morgan 44, produced continuously since 1936, was still rolling out of the Malvern factory in the 1960s, looking almost exactly as it always had. Sliding pillar front suspension, ash-framed bodywork, and a narrow, Spartan cockpit that made no apologies whatsoever. But here's the part most people overlook: despite its vintage appearance, the 44 was genuinely affordable and genuinely fast for its price. Morgan kept costs low by sticking with proven, simple engineering. No frills, no fuss, just driving in its purest form. Would you have chosen this over something more modern? Many did, and they never regretted it. The 44 attracted buyers who wanted a connection to the road that mass-produced cars simply couldn't offer. It was old school by design, and brilliantly so. Number 9, Reliant Sabre. Most people completely overlook this one, and honestly, that's a shame. The Reliant Sabre arrived in 1961, a genuine two-seat sports car from a manufacturer better known for three-wheelers. That alone should tell you something interesting was happening. Reliant had the ambition to compete in the Roadster market, and the Sabre was their serious attempt: a fiberglass body over a steel chassis, powered initially by a Ford engine before moving to a straight 6-unit later in its short life. It was lean, lightweight, and visually striking for its era. But here's the part that changes everything: the Sabre never quite found its audience. Production numbers were tiny, prices competitive, but the car existed in a crowded market where name recognition mattered enormously. Reliant simply couldn't fight against Triumph and MG with the same marketing firepower. A forgotten gem? Absolutely. A failed experiment? That depends entirely on who you ask. Number 8, Ginetta G4. If you enjoy the idea of a car built by 4 brothers in a farmyard, then the Ginetta G4 is going to make you smile. Launched in 1961 by the Walklet brothers in Suffolk, the G4 was everything a proper British sports car should be: lightweight, nimble, and devastatingly good fun on a winding country road. The fiberglass body kept the weight sensationally low, and the Ford mechanical components underneath kept running costs manageable for everyday buyers. But here's what most people never notice: the G4 wasn't just affordable to buy, it was affordable to race. Club Motorsport welcomed it with open arms, and the car developed a loyal following among drivers who wanted performance without financial ruin. And what happened next was remarkable: Ginetta survived where dozens of small British manufacturers didn't. The G4 laid the foundation for a company still producing cars today. That's a legacy worth appreciating. Number 7, MGA 1600 Mark II. By 1961, the EMGA had already established itself as one of the most beautiful British sports cars ever built. The 1600 Mark II arrived as the finest version of a car that had genuinely changed how the world viewed British motoring. A revised grille, recessed headlights, and a bored-out engine producing just over 90 brake horsepower, modest by modern standards, but thrilling in a car this light and this pretty. But here's the part that most historians quietly acknowledge: the Mark II arrived just as the MGB was being developed, which meant it never received the attention it truly deserved. It existed in the shadow of its own successor. Would you have bought the final version of a car knowing something new was coming? Thousands did, and they drove one of the most satisfying roadsters of the entire decade. The EMGA deserved every last moment of its time in the sun. Number 6, Austin-Healey Sprite Mark II. When the original Frog-Eye Sprite arrived in 1958, it charmed the world with its wide-eyed innocence. But the Mark II of 1961 grew up, and in doing so, became arguably the more complete car. The pop-up headlights were gone, replaced by a conventional front end shared with its cousin, the MG Midget. What remained was the essential spirit, tiny, lightweight, and genuinely inexpensive to own and run. The A-Series engine was simple enough that owners could maintain it themselves on a Sunday afternoon with basic tools. And here's the curiosity, the Sprite Mark II actually outsold many of its more expensive rivals simply because it asked so little of its owner financially. Running costs were negligible, insurance was affordable, and the driving experience punched well above its price point. It connected young British drivers to the open road in a way that few cars at any price could genuinely claim. A small car with an enormous heart. Number 5. MG Midget. Mechanically near identical to the Austin-Healey Sprite Mark II, the MG Midget arrived in 1961 wearing a slightly more upmarket badge, and that badge mattered more than people today might expect. MG carried enormous emotional weight in Britain and across export markets, particularly in America. The Midget offered a slightly more refined interior, a touch more chrome, and the reassuring three-letter badge that buyers trusted instinctively. But here's the part that changes the story. Despite costing marginally more than the Sprite, the Midget consistently outsold it throughout the decade. Brand loyalty was a genuinely powerful force. And what's fascinating is how the Midget evolved across its long production run, growing in refinement and power while never losing that essential affordability. It became the entry point into British sports car ownership for a generation of drivers. Simple, honest, and brilliantly effective, the Midget earned its place in automotive history through sheer consistency and charm. Number 4. Sunbeam Alpine. Here is a car that consistently gets underestimated, and that is a genuine injustice. The Sunbeam Alpine, introduced in 1959 and refined significantly through the early 1960s, offered something genuinely different, a proper Grand Tourer sensibility in an affordable British roadster. The styling was elegant and vaguely continental, with tail fins that gave it a distinctive silhouette unlike anything else on British roads at the time. The interior was comparatively well appointed, the ride more refined than most rivals, and the overall package aimed squarely at buyers who wanted sophistication without the premium price. But here's what most people never noticed: the Alpine was also a serious rally competitor, achieving genuine success in international competition. That sporting heritage rarely gets mentioned when people discuss affordable 1960s roadsters. Would you have chosen elegance over rawness? The Alpine proved convincingly that you didn't necessarily have to sacrifice one for the other. A quietly brilliant machine that history has been slightly unkind to. Number 3. Triumph TR4. As we approach the top 3, the quality of the cars rises considerably, and the Triumph TR4 of 1961 represents a genuine step forward in what an affordable British roadster could be. Designed by Giovanni Michelotti, the TR4 wore its Italian-influenced styling proudly, with a wider body, a proper wind-up windows system, and a rack-and-pinion steering setup that transformed the driving experience compared to its predecessor. The 2.1-litre engine delivered genuine performance, and the optional Surrey top, a removable panel roof, was a genuinely innovative feature for a car at this price point. But here's the part that most people find surprising: the TR4 was considered the grown-up choice. It attracted buyers who wanted real touring capability alongside sports car excitement. And what happened to its reputation over time is fascinating. It remains slightly overshadowed by the TR6, yet drivers who know it insist it's the more rewarding experience. A car deserving far more recognition. Number 2. Triumph Spitfire. We're almost there, and the car at number 2 is one that still inspires genuine passion today. The Triumph Spitfire, launched in 1962, was everything Triumph had learned about affordable sports car design distilled into one beautifully proportioned package. Again styled by Michelotti, the Spitfire wore its looks with extraordinary confidence for a car at its price point. The separate chassis allowed for a fully independent rear suspension, a technical achievement rarely seen at this level, and the bonnet opened in one dramatic forward-hinged piece, exposing the entire engine bay for easy maintenance. But here's what makes the Spitfire story so compelling: it was conceived from the beginning as an attainable dream. Not a compromise, Not a poverty-spec sports car, but a genuine roadster that happened to be affordable. Over 314,000 were eventually built across its long production run. And yet, one British roadster from this decade still commands more respect, more admiration, and more discussion than any other. Stay with us. Number 1, MGB. And here it is, the car that still gets the glory. The MGB, launched in October 1962, didn't just define affordable British motoring in the 1960s, it defined a generation. Built on a modern monocoque body, powered by a smooth 1.8-litre B-Series engine, and wrapped in bodywork of genuine elegance, the MGB offered a completeness that no rival could fully match. It was comfortable enough for long journeys, fast enough to thrill, and simple enough to maintain at home with reasonable competence. But here's the truth that separates it from everything else on this list: the MGB became a cultural symbol. It represented aspiration without exclusivity, performance without pretension. Over 500,000 were built. It conquered export markets, particularly America, in a way that reshaped perceptions of British engineering worldwide. Decades later, MGBs are still driven, still loved, still restored. That endurance isn't accidental. It is the earned reward of a car that simply got everything right. The 1960s was a golden decade for British roadsters, a time when manufacturers dared to build cars that were accessible, exciting, and genuinely alive. From the handcrafted simplicity of the Morgan to the cultural dominance of the MGB, these 10 cars represented something Britain did better than almost anyone else: they made driving feel meaningful. So here's a question for you: which of these 10 would you choose for a Sunday morning drive on an empty road? Let us know in the comments below. If this brought back memories, or sparked a new appreciation, please do like this video and subscribe to Britain Rewind for more classic British stories worth telling. We will see you in the next amazing video.